Hey, you guys, I wanted to come on here and talk about this situation with LeBron James and other NBA players boycotting the NBA and trying to take a knee by highlighting key systemic issues that take place within this country. And I don't know if I ever recall telling you guys this before, but I'm not a fan of protesting for the same reason I don't believe cancel culture works for black people. The reason I say that is because we have a monotonous and incessant pattern of boycotting or saying how we will no longer support something, only for it to be short lived and then we return to whatever institutional power caused us some form of distress. But I also want to say this: I am mindful of the fact that Black Americans largely don't have access to resources of their own, which are crucial for survival, so it oftentimes will require us to frequent establishments outside of our community. However, in this specific industry with sports, I don't think that's quite the same thing because no one is going to suffer any form of deprivation from not watching basketball unless you're one of those diehard sports fans. But before I get into reviewing this article, I want to talk a little bit about why I think protests are ineffective and why Black people can't successfully execute them. I don't know if you guys remember, but some time ago, the controversy occurred with H&M where one of the marketing teams from their brand tried to promote a little black boy wearing a sweater that said "coolest monkey in the jungle," and black people displayed their typical pattern of being frustrated and upset until eventually they got over their vexation and went back to H&M like 2 or 3 weeks later. Colin Kaepernick protested by taking a knee during 2016 to protest against police brutality against black people. That one seemed to be partially successful, but half of Black Americans were still tuned into the NFL, even though all of the leagues have their fair share of participation in your subjugation. And honestly, because of our naivete mentality, we don't even understand that sports in general are heavily dominated by black people, yet we have no ownership in any of these outlets. And that should stick out as a form of an abnormality. We don't place value in ownership and only seek respites in instant gratification. We make rash decisions and act impulsively without thinking about the consequences of our actions. And I'm going to expound on this a little bit further and say that even though black people have a natural affinity for athleticism, we encourage our children and teenagers to sign a deal with one of these pro league teams. We're told, oh yeah, if you sign this contract with our team, we'll give you a $10 million sign-on bonus or something to that degree. And because of that, we don't read contractual agreements. You never know if certain stipulations or restrictions are in place that you have to adhere by. And it's sad because these same deceptive practices and manipulation are used in other industries that black people have a vested interest in, like the music industry. And I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about: Sony Records, Atlantic, and so on. But I say all that really to say that we have a major lack in rational thought process. Logically, the predicament we're in makes no sense. How can a significant percentage of these industries host black athletes, yet not one single black person owns any portion of these areas? And I went off on that tangent because it's going to tie into the point that I'm about to make next. When we protest, protesting is something that little, if any, impact at all is actually made. Our leaders during the civil rights movement engaged in similar protests, and while I understand their purpose in doing it was with the intentions of trying to elevate the social status of black people, the protests of today, I feel, are not even remotely close to our ancestors' rationale for remonstrating. I feel like when we do it more so for attention and because it's a trend versus protesting to actually implement some type of change. And I really don't feel as though it's an effective method because with the most recent protests of George Floyd, that was really symbolic. No form of legislation was passed other than to create more discussions. And honestly, if the larger society had a genuine sense of benevolence, they would surely put into force a decree making it illegal for these acts to occur, or the dire consequence would be life imprisonment or death. And taking down Confederate statues, painting Black Lives Matter signs on streets, and businesses declaring their allegiance with Black Lives Matter isn't going to do anything. It's not tangible. And what black people see as progression is nothing more than an illusion, a fabrication, because no matter what symbolic gestures are taken, it does not touch the surface of our systemic oppression. And I really need for us to start using proper discernment for what actions are symbolic. Because think of it like this. Imagine someone tells you to describe words that are physical versus words that are abstract. Hope is an abstract word. It's something you can't touch or feel, but it's more of a concept like the number infinity. No one knows what number comes before or after infinity because infinity is a concept, not an actual number. A physical or concrete word would be like water because you can use any of the five senses to interpret water. Symbolism, as it pertains to our issues, is abstract because it doesn't present any substantial action in resolving these unremitting problems that plague our community. I want to introduce you all to this amazing new sponsor, Ash Kickin. They are a Black-owned health and beauty business that specializes in a multitude of potent and formidable products that will help enrich your skincare regimen. They take their time handcrafting some of the products so you know it's authentic and made with love and care. My personal favorites are the body butter and the African black soap. These both help to keep my skin clear and free of acne, and the best part is their health and beauty products are all natural. They also have hair care products unique and specific to our hair texture. Definitely make sure you guys check that out. The best part is every time I order from them, their shipping is fast and reliable, so make sure you guys check out Ash Kickin at www.ashkickin.com. Follow them on Instagram at ash.kickin. Like their page on Facebook. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at officialashkick and use my code ChrisMoore1 at checkout to get a discount on your skincare and health products. ashkickin.com. But I want to get into this. You guys will see what I mean throughout this article. So it starts off by saying LeBron James of the Los Angeles Lakers provided a pointed response on Wednesday night to President Trump's criticism of players kneeling during the national anthem. The games will go on without you watching. After Trump said earlier Wednesday that he regarded NBA players kneeling during the national anthem as disgraceful and vowed to stop watching games. James said that the basketball community was not sad about losing his viewership. In a Wednesday morning telephone interview with Fox and Friends, Trump said he turned off NBA games. When I see people kneeling and disrespecting our flag and disrespecting our national anthem, asked about Trump's comments after the Lakers' 105-86 loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder later in that day, James fired back. The game will go on without his eyes on it, James said at his post-game news conference from the NBA's so-called bubble at Walt Disney World in Florida. I can sit here and speak for all of us that love the game of basketball. We could care less. Now, I'm just going to stop here for a second. I know a lot of you are probably going to take what I'm about to say the wrong way. So I'll try to dissect this a little bit and give an explanation of what I mean. First off, this orange incompetent buffoon was going to judge the actions of these players regardless of if they did this or not. The larger society looks at the sector of black people as entertainment, and as quiet as it's kept, a lot of them still view black people as subhuman and something of lesser importance or value. For LeBron to even address him, I don't know why he even wasted time giving him any more attention than he's already receiving. He's making a mockery of this entire country and the world sees it, so there's the attention already. But I wish that when we boycott unapologetically, concentrate on our root cause for protesting as opposed to shifting the awareness to some unintelligent 7-year-old parading around in an 87-year-old body. And I say all the time in my political videos how I'm not a Democrat or Republican because I believe them to be the same. Two men from the larger society fighting for more power while presenting agendas that differ, but ultimately maintain the status quo of systemic racism. And of course, we can expect for melanin deficient people to say kneeling is disrespecting the flag. I seriously don't know where that narrative comes from because let's be honest, that flag has been the main source of bloodshed in this country for centuries. So if anything, kneeling should be the least of their worries, especially in reference to that blood-drenched flag. It's just another one of those right-wing talking points, and they say some of the most imprudent and injudicious things. It really just goes to show the level of mediocrity that runs rampant throughout this country. And it's propped up by the larger society because unfortunately with their level of power, no matter how dim-witted they sound, it's on a tier where it can be taken seriously. And this is why the current dictator can say all of these foolish things and no form of admonishment or scrutiny comes his way. Now, like I said, if LeBron was committed to this cause unapologetically, he wouldn't have paid Agent Orange any mind, but since he responded, it gives off the impression that he did this protest for attention, and this is a trend that I've been noticing a lot lately. While I admire the attention that Breonna Taylor's case has been getting, I'm starting to see where her death seems like it's being monetized, almost in a sense presented in a marketable way. I've been seeing face masks with her name or image on them, shirts, hats, and after seeing this, it kind of makes you question if people are starting to exploit Breonna Taylor's death for monetary gain. I could just be reaching here. And I would hope that that isn't the case, but if you guys Google it, you'll see where merchandise in her name is being sold. And like I said, I understand it, but to make a statement, like I get that. The issue becomes when her name turns into a brand as opposed to her name being respected, and hopefully to help black people in their fight against systemic oppression. But let me get back to this. It says the game will go on without his eyes on it, James said at his post-game news conference from the NBA. Practice of teams lining up and kneeling during the national anthem to protest systemic racism and police brutality has become a standard feature of every game at the NBA restart since the league officially resumed its season July 30th. There have been only a few exceptions. Orlando's Jonathan Isaac, Miami's Myers Leonard, San Antonio coach Greg Popovich, and his assistant coach Becky Hammond have chosen to stand. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, said last week that he would not enforce the league's rule, which dates to 1981, mandating that players, coaches, and team staff members line up and stand in a dignified posture for the playing of the national anthem before every game. I respect our team's unified act of peaceful protest for social justice, and under these unique circumstances, will not enforce our long-standing rules, Silver said. Trump tweeted last month that he would turn off games if players knelt, then broadened his criticism in Wednesday's Fox and Friends interview. It's not acceptable to me, Trump said, expressing disappointment because the White House, he said, worked very hard with the NBA to help the league reboot after the season was suspended on March 11th because of the coronavirus pandemic. When I see them kneeling, I just turn off the game, Trump said. I have no interest in the game. Trump criticized athletes for kneeling during the anthem in what is broadly seen as a strategy to appeal to his political base. In 2017, Trump urged NFL team owners to fire anyone who would not stand for the anthem. In June, he said he would not watch the NFL if players continue to kneel. Just stop here. I feel like because of our susceptibility through social engineering by means of repetition, it brings about a desired outcome. So I will continue to emphasize this point throughout my videos. And it's going to sound mean, but white elites look at it like this. As long as the Negroes aren't destroying anything, they can continue to protest, but we're not going to do anything concrete in their favor. And that's just what it is. We see how after the Civil Rights Movement, which had a number of different protests, it really didn't touch on the systemic issues. It really just allowed us to be in close proximity to the larger society without negative repercussions and access to education, which really is a slap in the face because we have to be educated in their preferred method of learning, aka learning about the American Revolution as opposed to learning about the Haitian Revolution or the history of Africa. But that's another topic for another video. At this point, I'm wondering, when we go out and do these protests, what exactly is it that we are hoping to accomplish? And I ask this question in all seriousness because after the conclusion of the Civil Rights Movement, we remain in a sort of stagnant stage. Home ownership and mortgage loan lending, police brutality, mass incarceration, and unemployment are still exactly where they were 60 years ago. And so, again, I'm just confused because at this point, what exactly are we doing? What are we hoping to get out of this? This pattern keeps repeating itself with no change in outcome. Are we just hoping at this point that our oppressors decide to have mercy on us, even though they haven't had any form of contrition since the inception of this country? Trying to incorporate a black national anthem into these sports isn't doing anything. Saying you stand with Black Lives Matter isn't doing anything. Dressing in African attire isn't doing anything. Painting your toenails black isn't going to do anything. I just don't see the delusion in thinking symbolism is the equivalent of progression. But I'm going to finish the rest of this out. So the article says, James had criticized Trump before, calling him "you bum" in a 2017 tweet in which he said it had been a great honor to go to the White House, a tradition for champion sports teams until Trump took office. In Wednesday's Fox interview, Trump said that no president had done more for black people than he had, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. When told of those comments, James said, "You're trying to make me laugh right now. I appreciate that." Like I said, these things aren't going to change. Protesting really does nothing except say, hey, look at me, I'm standing, or in their case, kneeling for a change. But this doesn't affect the higher power in any means because our mentality is very juvenile. After this trend passes 2 or 3 weeks later, we're going to go ahead and resume watching the game. I mean, come on, let's be real here. If we really wanted to hit them where it hurts, we would invest in our community. LeBron James created a school for children to go in his hometown, which is amazing. But when you look carefully at this picture, you can see who a majority of the teachers are. And some of you might say that there are some black teachers. I can guarantee you that the educational curriculum center around the typical American or European method of learning, which is essentially the same as any other school. It just happens to be owned by a black man. We can always talk about black teachers and scholars teaching our children. And when we open schools, apparently we still don't value our people enough to teach our youth about our history and heritage. I don't think we should be surprised by this. I was in a conversation with one of my subscribers the other day, and we talked about how a majority of the highest paid black men in our community will take on qualities of their oppressors, teaching the children in the oppressor's image, mimicking the style and decorum of the oppressor, basically ingratiating themselves in a culture that is not their own and disassociating themselves from their own image in the process of assimilation. And before anyone misinterprets what I'm saying, I know to a certain degree that we all have to take on this false persona, but we do this for biological purposes like survival, because let's be honest, who hasn't put on a fake smile just to get a job, to feed your family, or get your family members some medicine? And that's okay. You do what you have to do to survive. But my summation of this video is that protesting rarely works. Some black people want to be oppressors. Our value is misplaced in terms of focusing towards what's beneficial to our community. And just a fraction of this serves as the reason why we continuously remain stationary with no development or sustainability in infrastructure. Let me know your thoughts on this respectfully, because some of you still had the nerve to try me on the last video, and I had to show some of you the consequences of deviating from that simple demand. So comment with courtesy and respect your thoughts on this situation. Do you believe that protesting works, or do you think we need to seek a different route, or could we do both simultaneously? Like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next video.